Welcome to the Millennium Beat Podcast, where we like to encourage the world one story at a time. Now get ready to hear stories from around the world that encourage and uplift you. Now to the show with your host, Kevin James. Hey everybody, you have joined the Millennium Beat. I'm your host, Kevin James. Thanks for being here. If you haven't hit the like button and hit the bell to subscribe to our YouTube channel, please do that. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the description below. I'd like to introduce a good friend of mine, Pastor Paul Kendall, which has moved up north a little bit, not too far north, but he's moved up north. And he will be talking about his life and some of the things that are going on. So I like to thank my guest. Paul, thanks for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be with you again.
All right, Paul, you've been on before, but never on the video. Let's talk a little bit about your life, where you came from, and your story from where you're going and where you are right now, actually. So let's talk about that.
All right. Well, I was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, and lived there until I was about 10. That was where my family really got embedded in church, too. Not just going to church, but being involved in church. My dad was the music director. My mom was a Sunday school teacher. And over the years, as a result of that, all three of my siblings, that would be all four of us, eventually became ministers, pastors. So we had a good start in church. And so family and church means a lot to me. We eventually moved to Florida, Vero Beach, and I grew up there and met my wife, Evie, there. She was going to Southeastern. It was Bible college back then at Southeastern University now. And she would come to Vero with a friend of hers on short breaks. And that's where we met. And married at Central Assembly, which Kevin and I are very familiar with. In Vero Beach, Pastor Buddy Tipton married us. Well, actually, my brother Roy. It took about 4 pastors to get us married, come to think of it. That's what happens
funny.
when you have so many pastors in the family.
Right.
Pastor Buddy did the ceremony, and then Roy actually pronounced as husband and wife. We were his first wedding.
Okay.
But then we moved down to the Port St. Lucie area, and I got involved in a church that was pastored by my oldest brother, Rick. And we were in that area. Yeah, we were in that area for a long time. We had both of our kids there, first Renee, and then about 4 years later, Alex, and raised our kids there. And I was a minister of music for about 20 years. And that actually started back at Central Assembly in the youth band. I got to play the keyboard, and then I became a keyboard player for the church. And once we were married, that became a profession for me. And so I was a minister of music for about 20 years. And that encompasses several different churches that I was on staff at: Palm Beach Cathedral, Calvary Assembly in Lakeland, that's now High Point, a community church, Resurrection Life in Fort Pierce.
Wow.
And then in time, we planted a church called Zion Tabernacle in Fort Pierce. And we had that church for 3.5 years. And about that time, my daughter went to Southeastern University, just like her mama. And we started going over there for visits. One thing led to another, and we met a vice president there, Dr. Mike Rakes, who had some media needs. And one of the things about being a minister of music is it don't always pay so good. So you have to supplement your income. And I had gotten very involved in internet broadcasting.
Okay.
And the university had some internet broadcasting needs. And so I volunteered to handle some of them. That led to me being hired as a consultant, which led to a job offer. And so we moved to Lakeland and went to work at Southeastern University. Evie ended up working there as well. People accused us of following our children to school, which was somewhat true, somewhat not true. But anyway, we were at Southeastern University for 4 years, involved in a church in Lakeland there for a couple of years called Harvest Assembly. Good friends of ours, Pastor Keith and Joy Conley. And then that same vice president that had hired me at Southeastern had taken a church in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And About 4 years after he left, we had stayed in touch. Their church needed family pastors, and he thought of Evie and I. So he extended that opportunity to us, and that's what got us to Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And we served on staff at First Assembly here for 5 years, and then launched out and started Christ Family Church and pastored that for 5 years. And then some dear friends of ours that pastored a church in Louisville, which is just like it's almost Winston-Salem, but it's actually a city of its own, just outside of Winston-Salem. That friend of ours was pastoring, and he retired.
Okay.
And our churches were very similar, and the idea was to merge them together because they were so similar. And we just did that, and I think I just covered about 50 years of history.
and about 6 minutes. But you left out one of the best things is that you worked at TBN with me.
Yes. I worked at TBN for 7 years.
Yeah, I worked there for almost 12 or 15 years. I've lost track now. It's been so long.
Did you really?
Yeah, I remember you got a job that you were in traffic, and then you left, and then I got the job in traffic. Dealing with all the tapes.
Yeah,
and all that stuff. Back when we had tapes.
Master control operator, and checking all those videotapes in and out every month. Yeah.
Right. Let me ask you this question. When you were at TBN, what other things did you do? I know you said master control and then traffic. What else did you do there?
I ran a camera whenever they needed somebody to run a camera. I remember one time we actually took the calls for the telethon. That was interesting.
Oh, yeah, I remember
that happening one time. But the main thing I did was master control, and I did that the first 4 years on the midnight shift. And, that's kind of interesting that you bring that back up, because that's when and where I learned my internet media skills that actually led to my position at Southeastern University years later. It's interesting. During times like that, I can remember walking out in that parking lot. See, the deal was as a midnight.
Right. I was there.
Operator,
I did midnight, probably after you or before.
They encouraged you to do something else because you really only worked 5 minutes every hour. You had 55 minutes to do nothing. So I started learning how to do websites, and I learned how to encode video and broadcast it. This was even before YouTube became popular.
Oh, yeah.
But I used to go out in the parking lot. You know what it's like down there at nighttime. Yep. It was in an industrial park, nobody around for miles. I used to go out in the parking lot and walk in circles, looking up at the sky, saying, God, why are you punishing me like this? Why are you making me work in the middle of the night? Looking back now, I can see it was very strategic. The pressure and frustration of that forced me to learn something new, and that new knowledge, that new skill, took me out of the circumstances that I was so frustrated with. It really is interesting how when you're going through something that is difficult for you. Now, I loved TBN. I loved the people. Bob and Brenda Constantino were awesome. That was not the painful part. The painful part was going into work every night at midnight or 4 to midnight.
I can relate because eventually I did that Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. Then I dropped Thursday night because I was so busy doing weddings and stuff like that. But I would not pick that shift again. The TV station I work for now, I basically pretty much try to avoid that shift.
Yeah. Well, the bottom line was I did that midnight shift. See, that was my full-time job. And then I had 2 part-time daytime jobs. So I was sleep deprived for those 4 years on the midnight shift. So, but my point is going back to that moment, I thought, this is as bad as can possibly be. I don't understand why God is doing this to me. Where they say, what is it? Hindsight's 20/20.
20/20, yeah.
Looking back, it's easier to put it in perspective now because I can see clearly what God was doing with me during that time, using the circumstances and the pressure of frustration to force me to learn something new, which really turned my life around.
Right.
So I would encourage anybody that's listening to this, if you're going through a tough time that you just don't understand, have faith in God.
Yeah.
Don't walk around in circles looking up at the sky saying, why are you punishing me like this? Know that God is preparing you for something. And it really does make a whole lot more sense now. Also, the things that I learned during that difficult season, all of those things have come back to be tremendous assets to me now in pastoring and in managing a church. The audio, the video, the production, our broadcasting every week. I have a really good knowledge of all of that, which made it easy for us to do.
Right.
So I'm just amazed at the way God works in my life. And all things really do work together for good to those who are called according to God's purpose.
Thing I'm thinking about is it's kind of like our life's like a map, and we're on a little dot on that map, and God is looking at it from above us, and we can't see like the next step. But God says, I know where I'm bringing you to, and the things that you're in now is part of the plan to get you where you're going. It's just,
yes.
Yeah, it's just that way, how he does things.
Yeah, it's just really hard to see that when you're in the middle of the frustrating time.
Right, definitely. Thing I'm thinking about is it's kind of like being in a forest. You can't see. You could be, 50 feet from the end of the forest, but it's dark. It's nighttime. You can't see it, and you feel like you're in there forever. And it's not. You only have to walk 50 feet, and then eventually you will be out of the forest. And that's like life. We think we're at something like COVID-19. It's like it seems like we've been here forever, and it depends on what state you are. You might be still dealing a lot with it, but
yeah, we are.
But we're going to come out of it. It's like a tunnel. We're going to get to the other end, and things are going to get better, and we're going to move on because God has a plan for us. It's not now. It's not over. It's not like, no, we're all done. Oh, COVID-19 happened. I'm not. All my plans, forget it. Throw them out the window. No, God knew things were going to happen, and He knows what's going to happen next. So, let's ask that question. You talked a lot about your past, which was good. What is God doing right now? Let's divide it into two things. The church, which you just started, and then we'll talk a little bit about other adventures like, the Kindle Family Network and stuff like that. Other things you're doing, publishing and stuff like that. So let's go to there, and we'll talk about those things.
Okay, well, like I said, we pastored Christ Family Church here in Winston-Salem for 5 years. And then actually 3 years into that, a good friend of mine, Pastor Rodney Ashby, took me to lunch and talked to me about the possibility of the two churches merging. He had taken Generations Church really as a temporary interim type of pastor. Well, that interim pastoring lasted 7 years for him.
Oh, wow.
But 5 years into it, 3 years into our church, Christ Family Church, he takes me to lunch, talks to me about merging, says he's looking, forward to retiring. And I really prayed about it. I prayed about it every day for 2 months, and I just could not get a yes answer. So it didn't happen. And then it's a long story, but 2 years later, we were in the process of looking for property.
Okay.
And found out that Pastor Rodney had a stroke. So I went to see him and pray for him. And I was telling him about our search, and he brought up the idea of the merge again. Took about 2.5, 3 months of doing due diligence and meetings for us to come to the decision. But we finally merged the two churches. We actually called it a marriage because it was a lot like a marriage. The two were becoming one.
Right.
And so they had a wonderful property, about 7 acres, and beautiful facilities, good sanctuary, family life center, all the things that church would need. And so we married the two churches together, decided we needed a new name for this new church. And we actually put it out to the membership of the church. And that was a little scary for me because I thought we were going to end up with a name I didn't like. But it ended up being the name that I had hoped for. And the name was United Family Church. And so we have been united now since July. And it has been an absolutely wonderful experience. From being in church ministry most of my adult life, I've been involved in 2 church mergers and heard about quite a few others. And unfortunately, the majority of them are bad stories.
Right.
And so I anticipated, a lot of possible problems and trouble along the way. We haven't had any of that, none
Cool.
of it. It really has been incredible. And we knew a lot of these people from churches we were in together before. And it has just really turned into one great big wonderful family. And we have, COVID has been a real setback for us, only in the sense that we have about a third of our church that still has not come out, to actual services in person.
Right.
They view online. So I got a good number of people that I pastor that I've never even met yet. So in that sense, it's been a little bit of a frustration. But even through COVID, the church, somehow we have been able to thrive and have done well all the way around, financially, ministry-wise. And God has really blessed it. And it's just turned out to be a wonderful thing.
Cool. Question that comes to my mind is, what is the vision of the church, and where is the church going? In what direction is it's heading? What direction?
Well, the mission, vision, I guess you'd call it, of our church is that we are a loving, family-oriented church, learning the Word of God and leading people to Christ through acts of service. So our three words are love, learn, and lead. So we do a lot of expository teaching. We are a Bible-based church, so every message on every Sunday is coming straight from the Word one way or another. And we do topical messages too, but it's definitely Word-based. And then we really cater to every age, every season, every age of the family, every season of life. I know some churches these days are targeting certain age groups and certain markets. We just don't do that. We have, like we keep the kids in with us until after the offering because we want them to learn how to worship and give. And we even, have them in there for communion and things like that. And then we dismiss the kids. Well, we have a mass exodus of about 30%, of our sanctuary leaves and goes out to children's church and youth. But it's a wonderful thing to see. So we pay a lot of attention to every age group, from infants that have just been born into this world to our seniors, and even it sounds kind of morbid, but it's part of life. The death of God's saints, when we lose people, not only dealing with those issues in the very end of their life, but also the love and care of their widows, spouses, family members that have lost a loved one. So it is a really well-rounded family ministry and church. And but we're not only taking care of each other, we are doing the work of Jesus, which is to seek and save the lost. So we do everything we can to reach out to our community and care for people, love on people. We just think that the best way to lead someone to Christ is to do something for them. See a need and meet it, take care of somebody. And then there is this affinity that they have for you because you have cared. You've done something for me. You saw you heard that I had surgery and my grass was tall, and you came down and offered to mow it for me. Now I have warm fuzzies for you. There's not like this affinity, and it puts you in a lot better position to invite them to church or share Christ with them.
Right.
And that's what we mean by leading people to Christ through acts of service. Yeah. We actually minister to their needs, and that in turn draws them into the kingdom.
Awesome. While I'm thinking of this and closing up on our last topic is, before we get to our last topic, I should say, let's talk about some of the other things that you do. I mean, you're not just a pastor, you do other things. Let's bring them up and talk about those things.
All right. Well, I host a television program once a month on Global Television Network. I did it on CTN, a network called CTN that's much like TBN, for about, I guess I've been here 10 years. I did that for about 8 years, and this last has been for the past 2 years on a Global Television Network. And it's funny, it's a program called the Pastor's Study, where people call in and ask the pastors. It's not just me, it's several pastors. I host it often, but they'll ask them questions. And I never wanted to do it before because I was always intimidated. I thought they were going to ask me,
Something
to
you
explain,
might not know.
Yeah, Ezekiel's wheel inside
Right.
the wheel, or so. What does that mean? I wouldn't know. So I finally faced my fears and did it, and actually loved it. And nobody's ever asked me that question, by the way. And please don't now, because I don't know the answer.
Still don't.
But I have to study that soon. But so I do that, and I've authored several books. I never set out to be an author. My first one came from my radio program, Family Matters. And a publisher was driving through West Palm Beach, heard the program, called and asked me if I had the manuscripts. I said yes. He said, would you like to publish it? And one thing led to another, and that became the first book, called Family Matters. And then a marriage program that my wife and I have done for years, called The Marriage Miracle. It spawned off a book of its own called The Marriage Miracle. That was the next book. And then I've done a couple of other booklets, I guess you'd call them, shorter little pamphlets on different subjects like communication and dealing with anger. So I've authored about 5 books. And then, like I mentioned, the radio program, that has been something that has just taken an interesting life of its own. I started it about 17 years ago when we had our church, Zion Tabernacle. And I really did it to get people to come to our church, which never really happened. Every now and then somebody would come because they said they heard it, but it did not grow our church like I thought it would. But it took on a life of its own, and I shortened it down to a 3-minute program, which is the length of a song. And I loaded them all onto a website, KendallFamilyNetwork.com, and made it a free license. In other words, any radio station anywhere in the world can download them and play them. And it just took off and spread all over the country. I don't even know where all it plays, but I do know it plays in a lot of different areas because I'll get emails or contacts from different places. A friend of mine not too long ago said that she was talking to her mother in Pennsylvania and mentioned my name, and her mom said, "Oh, I listen to him every morning." She said, "You do?" And she said, "Yeah," and I didn't even know that it aired in Pennsylvania. So the radio program is another one of those things that I had no idea how God was going to use that. As a matter of fact, actually, I did have an idea. My idea of how he's going to use it was totally wrong. He used it in a completely different way than I ever dreamed or imagined. One last thing that I've started that I am excited about, I've had to slow down because of this church merger, but I do intend to pick it right back up soon. And that is a website called howtopastor.com. Howtopastor.com. And if you log on there, you'll see that I do these short videos, and they're intended primarily for either somebody that has just become a pastor, just starting, or a pastor that is just starting a brand new church from scratch.
Okay.
And I do videos on there about things like how to do a wedding, how to prepare a message, some tips on how to deliver a message. And my hope for that is that I can take some of the experiences that I have had, some of them even just within recent years, and relay those to other new pastors that are just learning their way.
Right.
And they're all things that I never learned in Bible college or in any of my formal education. They're just things that I learned in the real world of pastoring.
One of the things I'm thinking, oh yeah, In the description below will be all the links that he's talked about so you can get a hold of him. So let's go into the last question. We'll talk for a few minutes. You know, we got a little bit of time left. Not a lot, but we got a few. Let's talk about hope. As we all know, there's crazy things going on in the world right now. As of this time, this is November 2nd. Tomorrow is election day. So we have that. We have
right.
COVID-19 going on and stuff like that. So let's talk a little bit about hope. Let's give some of the audience members hope that there's something better going to be in store for them. So what would you have to say to them for hope?
Well, I guess you'd have to start with the lack of hope.
Okay.
That having hope is not the problem. It's hopelessness.
Okay.
Not having hope that I would say is the real problem. One of the things interesting, you mentioned COVID-19. I do a lot of counseling. I counsel 2 days a week, and people are not coming in saying that COVID is, or the stressors of COVID are doing this to me. They're not specifically saying that, but when you do something on a regular basis, you see trends, and I see, first of all, an increase in counseling sessions, an increase in frustration, and there is a hopelessness that is developing in people because of our current situation. And I would encourage anyone that's hopeless because of the stressors of the COVID crisis or the political crisis that we've been in or the racial injustice and police brutality crisis. It's like crisis stacked on top of crisis, stacked on top of crisis, is to, first of all, maybe read the book of Jude and see the even back then, the pattern of crisis leading to judgment of evildoers and deliverance by God. There's always deliverance by God. And even though it may seem like the situation that is causing you to be hopeless is going to be never ending, it's just not true. God always delivers us. We don't know how. He rarely does it on our timeline.
Right.
But one of my favorite sayings is that you can't judge tomorrow by the way things look today. And to think that tomorrow is going to be bad and my future is going to be bad because right now I feel so hopeless and things are not good is not good wisdom. Life comes in seasons. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end to every season. You move on to the next season. A story that comes to my mind is a guy that I counseled years ago who had been diagnosed with MS. When his wife found out his diagnosis, she left him, of all things. He would sit in my office on my couch there, and he came in on a walker, shaking, barely able to walk, sit on that couch and cry like a baby. He was in his early 30s, and to him, all hope was lost. He lost his health. He lost his wife. They didn't have kids, but everything that he dreamed of in his future was gone. And his name is Eric. He wouldn't even mind me sharing this if those of you that would ever see this that know who I'm talking about, Eric. I remember looking at him and telling him just what I've just said. That life comes and goes in seasons. There's always deliverance. That the day will come. It will come, Eric, that you have a giant smile from ear to ear, and you'll be remarried. You'll be fulfilled. You'll be happy. You'll be healthy. And he looked at me, like I was telling him a fairy tale.
Right.
But we prayed, and he did hold on to hope. Well, he gets accepted into an experimental MS program, treatment program. Last year, Eric ran a triathlon.
Wow.
Eric is now married to Joy, beautiful young woman. They are madly in love, and he does smile from ear to ear. And I'm telling you, no matter what your circumstances are, no matter how hopeless they seem, and no matter how bad things look, don't ever let go of hope. God always, always brings deliverance. His word never fails. It never returns void. And all things really do work together for good for those who are called according to God's purposes. In other words, live their life God's way.
Right.
So I would say, hold on to hope. This whole COVID thing, I've told people, try and find the good in it.
Mm-hmm.
I've told them this, look, make a little study of the businesses, the big ones, the nationwide ones, and the local mom and pop ones. Look at the ones that have failed and closed up shop, the ones that are barely struggling by, but make special note of those businesses that have thrived in the midst of crisis.
Right.
And it's those businesses and those people that have been creative, haven't allowed the heaviness of and the weight of the crisis to weigh them down. They've gotten creative. They've figured out new ways to get people to eat their food
Right.
and buy their products and deliver their products. And they're actually thriving in the midst of crisis. Even our church, as I mentioned, is somehow thriving in the midst of crisis. We are not suffering in any way. I know other churches are down 30% in tithes and offerings and things. We just don't have that. And it really is a mindset. It is your perspective.
Right.
And if you have a gloom and doom perspective, the crisis and the hopelessness is going to eat your lunch and do you in.
Right.
But if you have a God consciousness, a God awareness, a God perspective, you really can rise above crisis and trouble, hold on to hope and see God's deliverance, and even, thriving in the midst of what other people would call a uncontrollable crisis.
Thinking on that topic that you just talked about, I want you to just pray for the audience who is listening or watching on YouTube. Pray for them, and then we'll go from there. We'll close the show.
All right. Well, Father, I lift up the viewers of this program, and you know every intricate detail of every person. You know the plans that you have for each one. Jeremiah 29:11 says you have plans that are so good it would blow them away if they could see the fullness of it. And just like I've kind of rehashed through the details of my life, the good times and the bad, and my feelings of hopelessness and helplessness and depression in the bad times, only to see your deliverance, I pray that those that have heard that would take courage and be encouraged by those stories, because that's the way you work, especially your children. You don't leave us in the midst of crisis. You don't leave us in the midst of depression and hopelessness. You deliver us. And you have a plan for every one of us. And I pray for every person that's viewing this video, this program, that they would be encouraged, that they would rise above their trouble, that they would rise above this current three-layered crisis that our country is in, and that they would have a positive perspective, a God perspective, and rise above it all and accomplish everything that you have called them to do. I pray that you would give them great hope, great encouragement. In Jesus' precious name, amen.
Amen. Guys, you've been watching the Millennium Beat with your host, Kevin James. I'd like to thank my guest, Paul. Paul, thanks for being on today on the Millennium Beat.
Thank you very much for having me. God bless you, Kevin. Take care.
All right, everybody else, we'll see you guys next week on YouTube and our other podcast platforms. Thanks for being here, and everybody have a great week. Thanks for tuning in today to the Millennium Beat podcast. I hope you heard something that was encouraging to you. We'd like to hear from you with your story, so write us at stories@themillenniumbeat.com or give us a call at 407-624-9957 and leave us a voicemail. You may also find us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we have a YouTube channel. Please like us and share us with your friends. You may also go to our website at themillenniumbeat.com, and you'll find our podcast and our YouTube video. You also may find a calendar there with past and future guests and dates and times. Plus, another way for you to contact us with your stories or questions. This has been a Millennium Beat LLC production, copyright 2020. Views and opinions of the guest are not always the views and opinions of the Millennium Beat LLC.